The captain's fall. The Sergio Ramos. Story: the boy from Camas was the most hated defender in football history. The man with more red cards than most players have trophies. The captain who led Real Madrid to glory 4 times. The warrior who bled white for 16 years. And then, one summer morning, they told him his services were no longer needed. Just like that. No ceremony, no respect. Just a door closing on a legend who'd given everything. This is the story of Sergio Ramos. The boy from a nobody town who became somebody. The fighter who conquered Europe. The captain who learned that loyalty means nothing when you're no longer useful. And the man who discovered that being remembered doesn't mean you're not forgotten. Camas, 1990, where dreams are dust commas. If you blink while driving through southern Spain, you'll miss it. A small working-class town on the outskirts of Sevilla. 15,000 people. One main street, factories that smell like sweat and broken promises. The kind of place where boys inherit their father's jobs and call it destiny. This is where Sergio Ramos Garcia learned to breathe. 4 years old. Skinny legs, eyes that already carried fire. His father, Jose Maria, was a bullfighter turned laborer. A man who'd once dreamed of glory in the ring, but settled for shifts at the local factory. His mother, Paki, cleaned houses and raised 3 boys on pride and prayers. Money was a rumor. Food was negotiated. Dreams were luxuries they couldn't afford. But there was football. There's always football in Spain. The streets of Camas weren't paved with gold. They were paved with cracked concrete and broken glass. But to the neighborhood kids, those streets were stadiums. Every wall was a goal. Every rock was an obstacle to dribble around. Every game was war. Sergio didn't just play, he fought. Even at 4 years old, he played like losing meant death. Scraped knees, bloody elbows, didn't matter. He'd tackle kids twice his size. He'd argue with boys 3 years older. He'd defend his makeshift goal like it was the gates of heaven. His older brother, René, would watch him play and shake his head. "You're too aggressive, Sergio. It's just a game." But to Sergio, it was never just a game. It was proof he existed, proof he mattered. Proof that being from Camas didn't mean you had to stay in Camas. The family that played together, football ran in the Ramos blood like a genetic command. René played. Their younger brother, Miriam, yes, Miriam, a boy's name in their family, played. Even their father, despite the factory hours and the bullfighting scars, would kick the ball around with them on Sunday afternoons when his body allowed it. But Sergio was different. Where his brothers played for fun, Sergio played like he was settling a score with the universe. Every touch of the ball was deliberate. Every challenge was personal. Every loss burned in his chest for days. At 7 years old, he was already known in the neighborhood. Not as the talented kid, as the crazy one. The kid who'd slide tackle on concrete. The kid who'd argue with the makeshift referee, usually whoever's father was watching. The kid who once broke his arm and wanted to keep playing. "Sergio, you need to calm down," his mother would say, cleaning his wounds after another brutal street match. Football shouldn't hurt this much, but pain was how he knew he was alive. Pain was the price of maturity. And Sergio Ramos was willing to pay any price. Sevilla FC, the door open, 8 years old. A scout from Sevilla FC's youth academy came to Camas looking for talent. Not because Camas was known for producing footballers, but because good scouts look everywhere, even in forgotten towns. He watched the local kids play on a dirt pitch that looked more like a construction site. Most of them were decent. A few showed promise. And then there was this one kid, number 4, playing defense, who caught his attention for all the wrong reasons. The kid was aggressive. Too aggressive. He'd push. He'd grab shirts. He'd argue every call. He played defense like he was personally offended by the concept of someone scoring. But here's what the scout noticed. The kid read the game. He anticipated passes before they happened. He positioned himself where the ball would be, not where it was. And most importantly, he had something you couldn't teach: hunger. After the game, the scout approached Jose Maria. "Your son, Sergio, how old?" "8. He plays like he's angry at the world." Jose Maria smiled. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. He is. Bring him to Sevilla FC on Saturday. Youth tryouts. That conversation changed everything. The Sevilla FC Academy, learning to be controlled chaos. Saturday morning. Sevilla FC's training facility. To Sergio, it looked like a palace. Grass that was actually green. Real goalposts. Coaches in official club jackets. Kids who had proper boots instead of hand-me-downs held together with tape. Sergio showed up in his brother's old cleats. 2 sizes too big, but he walked onto that pitch like he owned it. The tryout was brutal. 50 kids competing for maybe 10 spots. Everyone was talented. Everyone was desperate. Everyone had something to prove. Sergio played right back. Not because he wanted to, because that's where they put him, and he hated it. He wanted to score goals. He wanted to attack. He wanted glory. But defense? Defense was where you stopped other people's glory. It felt like punishment, until he understood what it really was. Power. Because when you're a defender, you control everything. You decide who passes. You decide who gets hurt. You decide when to be clean and when to be cruel. You're not just playing football. You're playing chess with physical consequences. Sergio dominated that tryout. Not with skill, plenty of kids were more technical. He dominated with intensity. He defended like every attacking player had personally insulted his family. He marked opponents so aggressively that coaches had to pull him aside multiple times. "Sergio, you can't play like this. You'll get sent off every game." He was 8 years old. He already had a reputation. But Sevilla FC saw something in him. Something raw and dangerous and potentially brilliant. They offered him a spot in the academy. His father cried when they told him. His mother kissed his forehead and whispered, "Don't waste this." Sergio had no intention of wasting anything. The rise through the ranks years passed. Sergio grew, not just physically, though he shot up like he was trying to escape gravity, but as a player. 13 years old, 14, 15. He moved through Sevilla's youth ranks like a force of nature. Every team he played for improved immediately, not because he scored goals, because he refused to let the other team score. He developed a playing style that would define his entire career: aggressive, intelligent, fearless. He'd tackle with perfect timing. He'd read the game 3 passes ahead. He'd organized the defense like a general commanding troops, but he also collected yellow cards like trophies, argued with referees, got into fights with opponents, played on the edge of control and chaos. Coaches didn't know what to do with him. He was brilliant. He was also a problem. "Sergio, you need to calm down," they'd say. He never listened, because calm players don't change the world. At 16, he was called up to Sevilla FC's B team. At 17, he made his debut for the senior team, the youngest defender in the club's modern history. And in that first season, he showed everyone exactly who he was. Not just a defender, a leader, a warrior, a player who'd rather lose bleeding than win quietly. The Real Madrid call, When Giants Notice, summer 2005. Sergio was 18 years old. 1 season with Sevilla's first team, 39 appearances, 2 goals, countless yellow cards, a reputation as the most promising young defender in Spain, and then Real Madrid called, not a casual inquiry, an official offer. 27 million euros, a world record for a Spanish defender. For a kid from Camas who'd grown up playing on broken streets, Sevilla didn't want to sell. But they couldn't refuse that money. And Sergio? Sergio couldn't refuse destiny. His last day in Sevilla was emotional. The fans understood. He was from there. He'd bled for them. But Real Madrid was Real Madrid. You don't say no to that. He gave an interview before leaving. "I'll always be Sevillista, but this is my chance to become something bigger." He had no idea how right he was. Madrid. The city that eats dreams. August 2005. Sergio Ramos arrived in Madrid wearing a suit that didn't quite fit and carrying a single suitcase. The Bernabeu Stadium was a cathedral. 80,000 seats, history in every corner. Alfredo Di Stefano, Zinedine Zidane, Ronaldo. The greatest players in history had played here, and now, somehow, a kid from Camas was being asked to join them. The presentation was surreal. Thousands of fans showed up just to see him unveiled. 18 years old, standing in the center of the pitch. Holding up the white jersey with Ramos 4 on the back, he was terrified. But he'd learned early, never show fear. "I'm here to win," he told the press. "I'm here to make history," bold words for a teenager. But Sergio Ramos had never been good at being humble. The first season, baptism by fire. His first season at Real Madrid was brutal, not because he wasn't good enough. Because Madrid was chaos. The club was in transition. Legendary players aging, young players trying to prove themselves. Coaches changing every few months, media pressure that could crush mountains. Fans who demanded perfection and accepted nothing less. Sergio played right back, still not his preferred position, but where the team needed him. And he was good. Sometimes brilliant, but also reckless. Yellow cards accumulated. Mistakes happened. The Madrid press, never kind to anyone, started questioning whether he was worth the money. Too aggressive, too young, too emotional. Every criticism made him play harder. Every doubt made him train longer. Every mistake became fuel, because Sergio Ramos had a gift. He turned hatred into energy. The transformation from player to warrior. Second season. Third season. Sergio wasn't just improving. He was evolving. He studied the game obsessively. Watched videos of the best defenders in history. Paolo Maldini, Alessandro Nesta, Roberto Carlos. He learned their movements, their positioning, their timing, but he also kept his edge. The aggression, the willingness to destroy opponents who disrespected him. The absolute refusal to back down from anyone. Opponents started fearing him. Not just because he could tackle, because he was unpredictable. You never knew if you were getting a clean defensive play or a physical war. He played right on the line between legal and violent, and sometimes crossed it deliberately. Red cards started coming. Not constantly, but enough to establish a pattern. Enough for people to start calling him dirty. He didn't care. "I play to win," he'd say in interviews. If they can't handle that, they should play a different sport. By 21, he'd established himself as one of the best young defenders in the world. But more importantly, he'd established himself as a personality, not just another player. A character. Someone people loved or hated, but never ignored. 10. The captain emerges. The 2009-2010 season changed everything. Real Madrid appointed Jose Mourinho as coach. A man as controversial as he was brilliant. A coach who demanded total commitment and destroyed anyone who didn't give it. Mourinho saw something in Sergio, not just talent, leadership potential, the kind of player who'd run through walls for the team, who'd sacrifice his body, who'd drag teammates to victory through sheer will. Sergio became a starter at center back, finally, his natural position, and he thrived. Not just as a defender, as a leader, as the voice organizing the defense, the player who'd scream at teammates when they made mistakes and hug them when they succeeded. He was 24 years old. Most players that age are still learning the game. Sergio was teaching it, and then Iker Casillas, the longtime captain, started having issues with Mourinho. The relationship deteriorated. The team needed someone to bridge the gap. They turned to Sergio. Not officially yet, but everyone knew. The white armband was coming. The responsibility was coming. The burden of leading one of the world's biggest clubs was approaching. And Sergio, he was ready. The promise to himself late one night after training, Sergio sat alone in the Bernabeu. The stadium was empty. Just him and 80,000 ghost seats. He thought about his father working in that factory in Camas, his mother cleaning houses, his brothers who'd played football but never made it, every kid from his neighborhood who'd dreamed but never escaped. He'd escaped. He'd made it. But making it to Madrid wasn't enough. Staying at Madrid wasn't enough. He needed to become immortal. He needed to become a legend. He made himself a promise that night. He would give Real Madrid everything. Every ounce of sweat, every drop of blood, every moment of his career. He'd be the kind of player future generations studied, the kind of captain they built statues for. He had no idea how true that would become, or how painful. The White Armband Tatu 10, 2013. The Hunger Years, Real Madrid. In the early 2010s was a team that had everything except the one thing that mattered, the Champions League, La Décima, the 10th European Cup. It had become an obsession, a curse. Since 2002, Madrid had watched Barcelona dominate Europe, watched other clubs lift the trophy, watched their own legacy fade into history. The pressure was suffocating. Every season that passed without Champions League glory felt like failure, no matter how many domestic trophies they won. Sergio Ramos felt that pressure more than anyone, because by 2013 he'd become the vice-captain, the player teammates looked to when things got difficult, the voice in the locker room when motivation died. He was 27 years old, at the peak of his physical powers, tactical awareness sharpened by years of elite football, leadership qualities that couldn't be taught, and an ego that demanded greatness, but greatness kept slipping away. Champions League semifinals, quarterfinals, close but never close enough. Every elimination burned, every loss felt personal. Every year without La Décima was proof that his promise to become a legend remained unfulfilled. "We'll get there," he'd tell teammates after devastating losses. "We just need to believe." But belief alone doesn't win trophies. Sacrifice does, blood does, moments that define careers. And Sergio Ramos was about to have his moment. May 24th, 2014, the goal that changed everything champions. Ligue Final, Real Madrid versus Atlético Madrid, Lisbon, the Estádio da Luz. For 90 minutes, Real Madrid had been dominated. Atletico led 1-0. Defensive, organized, suffocating. Diego Simeone's tactical masterpiece, strangling the life out of Madrid's attack. 90 minutes passed, then 92, 93. The Champions League trophy sat meters away from Atletico's bench. Their staff was already preparing to celebrate. Sergio stood in midfield, exhausted. His legs burned, his lungs screamed. He'd given everything for 93 minutes, and it wasn't enough. Fourth official held up the board. 3 minutes of added time remaining. The ball came to Luka Modric on the right. He looked up, saw bodies in the box, sent in a cross that looked more like desperation than strategy. And Sergio Ramos did what he'd been doing since he was 4 years old, playing on broken streets in Camas. He fought. He attacked that ball like it was the only thing between him and drowning. Rose above defenders, connected with his head. Perfect contact. The ball arrowed toward goal. Time slowed. Everyone in the stadium held their breath. Goal, 93rd minute. Sergio Ramos, 1-1. The Bernabeu legend would later show the exact time, 92-48. He ran to the corner flag, ripped off his shirt, flexed every muscle, and screamed into the Lisbon night. Not celebration, release. Years of frustration, years of falling short, years of being told Madrid would never win La Décima. Extra time became a formality. Madrid scored 3 more. 1-4-1. La Décima achieved, but everyone remembered that 93rd minute. That moment when Sergio Ramos refused to accept defeat, when he grabbed destiny and forced it to bend to his will. After the match, in the locker room, Iker Casillas approached him. "You saved us," Sergio shook his head. "We saved each other," but they both knew the truth. That goal had transformed Sergio from a great player into a Madrid icon, from vice-captain to inevitable captain. When 15, the armband becomes his. When Iker Casillas left Real Madrid in 2015, there was no discussion about who would replace him as captain. Sergio Ramos, 29 years old. 10 years at the club, the heart of the defense, the voice of the team, the player who'd scored the most important goal in modern Madrid history. The white armband wasn't given to him. He'd earned it in blood and sweat and moments that mattered. His first speech as captain was pure Sergio. "We don't wear this shirt to participate. We wear it to dominate, to win, to make history. And anyone who doesn't understand that can leave. No diplomacy, no political correctness, just raw expectation and demand for excellence," the team responded. Because that's what happens when your captain doesn't just ask for greatness, he embodies it. The Golden Years, 2016-2018. What followed was the most dominant period in Champions League history, P16, Champions League winners, defeating Atletico Madrid again in the final, 2017, Champions League winners. First team to defend the title in the modern era, 2018, Champions League winners. Third consecutive title, something that would never happen again, 4 Champions League trophies in 5 years. Sergio Ramos was the captain for 3 of them. The defensive leader, the tactical organizer, the warrior who'd play through injuries that would hospitalize normal people. He played with broken ribs, dislocated shoulders, knee problems that required constant management. Didn't matter. If Real Madrid needed him, he played. Opponents feared him, not just because he was good, because he was relentless. He'd mark you physically. He'd get in your head psychologically. He'd intimidate referees. He'd do whatever it took to win, and if you crossed him, if you disrespected Real Madrid, he'd make sure you paid for it. The red cards kept coming. Elbows, late tackles, arguments that became confrontations. He collected them like medals. Each one proof that he played on the edge, that he refused to be controlled. By 2018, he held the record. Most red cards in La Liga history. Most red cards in Champions League history, a distinction that would have embarrassed most players. Sergio wore it like a badge of honor. "I play with passion," he'd tell reporters. "If that's a crime, arrest me." The moments that defined him, there are plays that statistics don't capture. Moments that don't show up in match reports. But everyone who watched football in the 2010s remembers. The shoulder injury against Liverpool in the 2018 Champions League final. Mohamed Salah challenging him. Both going for the ball. Salah's shoulder dislocating. Liverpool fans calling it intentional. Sergio saying it was football. The endless yellow cards for tactical fouls. Stopping counterattacks by any means necessary. Taking the booking because the team came first. The leadership in finals. When younger players froze, Sergio grabbed them by the shirt and told them exactly what to do. When the pressure mounted, he got louder, more demanding, more present. The iconic goals. Headers in crucial moments. Somehow always being in the right place when Madrid needed salvation. Defenders aren't supposed to score important goals. Sergio specialized in it. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was an identity. Real Madrid's DNA in human form. The embodiment of "we never surrender." The documentary, Heart of Sergio Ramos 2019. Amazon Prime released a documentary series about his life. El Corazón de Sergio Ramos, The Heart of Sergio Ramos. It showed everything. The training, the family, the injuries, the moments of doubt that he'd never admit publicly. The pressure of captaining the most famous club in the world. One scene showed him alone in the locker room after a loss. Just sitting, staring at nothing. The weight of responsibility crushing him. "People think it's easy," he said to the camera. "They see the goals, the trophies. They don't see what it costs, what you sacrifice, who you become to carry this." The documentary humanized him. Showed the person behind the warrior, the father, the son, the man who'd carried the expectations of millions on his shoulders for over a decade. But it also showed his ego, his belief that he was indispensable. His conviction that Real Madrid needed him more than he needed Real Madrid. That belief would soon be tested. 2020. The cracks begin to show, 33 years old. Most defenders at that age are declining. Sergio was still elite, still playing every game, still captaining Madrid to victory, but the body was starting to send signals. Recovery took longer, injuries happened more frequently. The explosive speed that had defined him was still there, but it required more effort to access. Madrid won La Liga in 2020. Sergio was instrumental, but whispers started. In the press, in the boardroom. Among fans who'd once worshipped him, he's slowing down. His mistakes are increasing. "We need to plan for life after Ramos." Sergio heard every word, and every word made him play harder, train longer, push his body beyond reasonable limits, because admitting decline meant admitting mortality. And Sergio Ramos had spent his entire career refusing to accept limitations. The contract negotiation, When Loyalty Dies 2021. Sergio's contract was expiring. He'd been at Real Madrid for 16 years, won everything, bled white in every match. Given his prime years to the club, he wanted a 2-year extension. Security for his family, recognition of his service. Real Madrid offered 1 year. Club policy, players over 30 get 1-year contracts. No exceptions. "I'm not just any player over 30, Sergio argued. "I'm the captain. I've won 4 Champions Leagues. I deserve more." The board was unmoved. Policy is policy. 1 year or nothing. It became a standoff. Pride against policy. Legend against business. Emotion against cold calculation. The negotiation dragged on. Weeks became months. Training started without a resolution. The tension was suffocating, and then came the call. The one that changed everything. Florentino Perez, the club president. "Sergio, we've made our final offer. 1 year. Take it or we move on." There was no warmth in that call. No acknowledgement of history. No respect for what he'd given. Just business, Sergio hung up. Sat in silence. 16 years reduced to a phone call and an ultimatum. This is how legends are treated when they're no longer indispensable. The announcement. The end of an era. June 17, 2021. Real Madrid called a press conference. Sergio Ramos sat at a table with Florentino Perez beside him. The room was full of journalists. Cameras everywhere. The atmosphere felt like a funeral. After 16 years, Sergio began, voice cracking, "I'm leaving Real Madrid." He tried to continue but couldn't. The emotion was too much. Tears fell. This warrior who'd never shown weakness in battle was crying in front of the world. "This club is my life. I wanted to stay, but..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Everyone understood. Real Madrid had decided he was expendable. The fairy tale had an expiration date. Florentino sat beside him, stone-faced. No emotion. No gratitude. Just the cold reality of business. The press conference lasted 15 minutes. It felt like an execution. When it ended, Sergio walked out of the Bernabeu as a former player. The armband that had defined him for 6 years was gone. The white shirt that had been his identity was history. He'd given Real Madrid his youth, his health, his heart, and they'd given him a 1-year contract offer and a press conference when he refused. The aftermath. Processing rejection. The days after leaving were disorienting. For 16 years, his life had been structured around Real Madrid. Training at Valdebebas, games at the Bernabeu, the rhythm of a season, the pressure of expectation. Now, nothing. He'd wake up and forget just for a moment that he no longer belonged. Then reality would crash back. He was unemployed, teamless, a legend without a home. Offers came. Paris Saint-Germain was interested. A 2-year deal, good money, a chance to win more trophies. But it wasn't Real Madrid. It would never be Real Madrid. He signed with PSG in July 2021, told reporters he was excited, told himself it was a new adventure, but everyone could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't what he wanted. This was what was left. PSG, the Golden Cage Paris. Beautiful city, prestigious club, talented teammates, Neymar, Mbappé. Messi arrived that same summer. On paper, it was perfect. A super team, a guaranteed trophy machine. In reality, it was a collection of egos with no soul. Players who'd been bought rather than built. A team assembled by money rather than chemistry. Sergio tried to lead. Tried to bring the same intensity he'd had at Madrid. But it didn't work. These players didn't respond to his style. They didn't need a warrior captain. They needed a manager who let them shine individually. His first season at PSG was plagued by injuries, calf problems, muscle strains. His body, pushed beyond limits for 20 years, was finally sending him a bill. He played only 13 league games that season. For a player who'd built his reputation on availability, on never missing matches, it was humiliating. The PSG fans were polite, respectful, but they didn't love him. How could they? He wasn't theirs. He was Real Madrid's, and everyone knew it. The realization. You can't go home again. Second season at PSG, 36 years old. He played more. 43 matches across all competitions. Not bad for someone his age, but he was a role player now. Not the leader. Not the captain. That armband belonged to Marquinhos. Not the voice that mattered. He'd watch games from the bench sometimes. See younger defenders making mistakes he'd never make. Want to scream instructions but knowing nobody would listen. This is what decline looks like. Not a sudden collapse, a slow fade. From essential to useful to decorative, he won League One with PSG, a trophy most players would celebrate. For Sergio, it felt hollow. League One wasn't La Liga. PSG wasn't Real Madrid. This wasn't home. At night, he'd scroll through social media, see highlights of Real Madrid winning La Liga, see them reaching another Champions League final, see them doing it without him. They'd moved on, built a new defense, found new leaders, and they looked fine. Better, even. That hurt more than any tackle he'd ever received. 23. The impossible dream of return. His contract with PSG ended in June 2023. 37 years old. Still capable of playing at the highest level, but no longer capable of dominating it. Rumors started. Ramos wants to return to Sevilla, not Real Madrid. They'd made it clear that door was closed. But Sevilla, where it all started. Where he'd been loved before he was famous. Maybe there, he could find what he'd lost. In September 2023, he signed with Sevilla FC. A 1-year deal. Coming home. The announcement was emotional. Sevilla fans celebrated. The prodigal son returning. The legend coming back to where he belonged. But this wasn't 2005 Sergio Ramos. This was a slower, older, more fragile version. A player whose name carried more weight than his legs could support. The cruel reality. Legends fade. His return to Sevilla was supposed to be glorious. A veteran bringing experience and leadership to a struggling team. Instead, it was painful to watch. He tried. God, he tried. But his body wouldn't cooperate. Injuries plagued him. 7 games. 7 games in his entire first season back. Sevilla fans stayed supportive, chanted his name. But you could see the pity in their eyes. This wasn't the Sergio Ramos they remembered. This was a shadow wearing his number. April 2024. He announced he was leaving Sevilla. Not retiring officially, just leaving. The statement was vague. New opportunities, different challenges. Everyone knew what it meant. His body was done. His career was over. The warrior had lost his final battle. The legend who walks alone, May 2024. The announcement nobody wanted. The statement came on a Tuesday morning, brief, professional, emotionless. After careful consideration, I have decided to leave Sevilla FC. I want to thank the fans for their support during this chapter. No dramatic press conference. No tears this time. Just words on a screen. The end written in corporate language that tried to hide what everyone knew. His body had given up before his heart could accept it. Sergio Ramos was 38 years old, 22 years as a professional footballer, 732 club appearances, 101 goals, an absurd number for a defender, 4 Champions League trophies, 5 La Liga titles, the respect of an entire generation, and it was over. Not with glory. Not with a final match where fans could say goodbye properly. Just a statement. A door closing quietly on a career that had always been loud. He didn't announce retirement. Didn't officially say the word, because saying it would make it real. And Sergio Ramos had spent his entire life refusing to accept reality when it didn't align with his will. But everyone understood. The Warriors' war was finished, the silence after the storm. What does a fighter do when there are no more fights? For 2 decades, Sergio's life had been defined by structure. Training schedules, match days, recovery protocols, travel itineraries, press conferences. The rhythm of professional football that never stopped, now, silence. He'd wake up at 6 a.m., muscle memory from 20 years of early training sessions, and have nothing to do. No pitch to report to, no teammates waiting, no opponent to study, just time. Endless, empty time. His wife, Pilar Rubio, noticed the change immediately. The restlessness. The way he'd watch football on television with the intensity of someone still playing. The way his leg would twitch during defensive moments, body wanting to do what his career no longer allowed. You need to find something else, she'd say gently, something that gives you purpose. But what purpose matches captaining Real Madrid? What replaces scoring the 93rd minute goal that won La Decima? What fills the void left by 16 years of being essential? Nothing. The answer was nothing. The Hall of Memory, his home in Madrid, had a room dedicated to his career. Not a shrine. He'd never call it that. But that's what it was. Jerseys from every club. Real Madrid, Sevilla, PSG, Spain's national team. Each one representing a chapter. Each one carrying memories that felt increasingly distant. Trophies on shelves. 4 Champions League medals. La Liga titles. Copa del Rey. The weight of achievement preserved in metal and glass. Photos on the walls. The 93rd minute celebration in Lisbon. Lifting trophies with teammates whose names younger fans were already forgetting. The white armband on his arm. Captain of the greatest club in the world. He'd walk through that room sometimes. Touch the fabric. Hold the medals. Try to remember what it felt like to be that person. That player. That leader. But memory is a poor substitute for reality. And reality was that he'd never put on a Real Madrid jersey again. Never hear 80,000 fans chant his name. Never feel the weight of the captain's armband. Those things existed now only in this room. In photographs and fabric and metal, ghosts of glory. Social media. The performance of relevance. His Instagram still had over 60 million followers. His posts still generated hundreds of thousands of likes. Brands still wanted partnerships, but the content had changed. No more matchday photos. No more victory celebrations. No more locker room moments with teammates. Now it was family photos, vacation pictures, sponsored posts for watches and clothing. The carefully curated life of a former athlete trying to maintain relevance without the thing that made him relevant. He'd post throwback photos sometimes. On this day in 2014, accompanied by the 93rd minute goal. The engagement would spike. Comments full of nostalgia, legend, miss watching you play. Real Madrid hasn't been the same without you. Past tense. Always past tense. He'd scroll through comments late at night when he couldn't sleep. Read the praise. Feel the validation. But also feel the distance. These people weren't celebrating who he was. They were mourning who he'd been. And you can't live in the past, no matter how glorious it was. The Real Madrid match, he couldn't avoid October 2024. Champions League. Real Madrid versus Borussia Dortmund at the Bernabeu. Sergio was invited. VIP box. Honor the legend. Let him see the club he'd bled for still competing at the highest level. He almost declined. The thought of watching Real Madrid without being part of it felt masochistic. But declining would seem petty, bitter, like he hadn't moved on. So he accepted. The Bernabeu looked the same, smelled the same, sounded the same. But everything was different because he wasn't wearing the white shirt. He sat in the VIP section, comfortable seats, perfect view. Surrounded by executives and dignitaries who made polite conversation about his career. You were magnificent. That 93rd minute goal was destiny. Real Madrid was lucky to have you. Past tense. Always past tense. The match started. Real Madrid's defense. Antonio Rudiger, Eder Militão. Players who'd replaced him. Younger. Faster. The club had moved on efficiently. He watched them defend. Saw mistakes he would have prevented. Saw positioning errors that made him wince. Wanted to scream instructions from the VIP box, but knowing nobody would hear. Real Madrid won 3-1. The crowd celebrated. The new generation of players lifted their arms in victory. The Bernabeu sang, and Sergio sat there applauding politely, feeling like a ghost at his own funeral. After the match, he was invited to the locker room. To see old friends? To reconnect, he walked in. Some players remembered him. Modric, Carvajal, veterans who'd played alongside him. They embraced, shared memories. But the younger players, the ones who'd joined after he left, they treated him like a visiting dignitary. Respectful, distant, historical. He left after 15 minutes. Couldn't bear it any longer. This place that had been his home for 16 years now felt like a museum where he was an exhibit. The documentary follow-up that never happened in 2019. His documentary had been a celebration. The heart of Sergio Ramos, showing him at his peak. Captain of Real Madrid, leader of men, still relevant, still essential. Amazon approached him in 2024 about a follow-up. Where is he now? What's life after football? He considered it. But what would they show? A man struggling to find purpose? A former captain with no team to lead? A warrior with no battles to fight? That's not the story people want. They want inspiration. They want the legend intact. They don't want to see what happens when glory fades and reality sets in. He declined the offer. Some stories are better left untold. The kids who don't remember. His son, Sergio Jr., played youth football. 12 years old, talented, passionate, playing defense like his father. Sergio would attend the matches, stand on the sideline, watch his son develop. Feel pride mixed with something darker, envy? No, not quite. More like longing to be the one on the pitch again. After one match, another father approached him. Friendly, making conversation. Your son plays well. Reminds me of a famous defender. What was his name? Ramos. Sergio Ramos? The father didn't recognize him. Didn't know he was talking to the legend himself. Sergio smiled. Yes, Sergio Ramos. Whatever happened to him? Is he still playing? No, retired. Shame, he was good. My son loves watching old highlight videos. Old highlights. That's what he'd become. Content for YouTube compilations. A reference point for a generation that never saw him play live. The father walked away, never knowing he'd been talking to the man himself. Sergio stood there, invisible, watching his son play. Watching a new generation that would create their own heroes and forget the old ones. This is what legends become. History lessons for kids who prefer the present. The phone that never rings in his playing days. His phone was constant chaos. Messages from teammates, calls from coaches, agents negotiating deals, media requesting interviews, brands offering partnerships. Now, silence. A few messages from former teammates on holidays. Happy birthday wishes from people maintaining professional relationships. Occasional media requests for quotes about current players, but no calls from coaches needing him. No clubs desperate for his services. No urgent messages about tomorrow's match because there was no tomorrow's match. The phone sat on his desk, charged, waiting. For what? He didn't know. Maybe that's the hardest part of retirement. Not the loss of playing, but the loss of being needed, of being essential, of being the person people called when everything was on the line. Sergio Ramos had spent 20 years being indispensable. Now he was dispensable, and dispensable feels a lot like invisible. The Sevilla streets, full circle December 2024. Sergio returned to Camas, the small town where it all started, where a poor kid with big dreams used to play football on broken streets. The town had changed. New buildings, better roads, progress that 40 years brings. But the essence remained. Still working class, still the kind of place people left if they wanted more. He walked the streets he'd walked as a child. Saw kids playing football in the same spots he had. Same passion, same dreams, different faces. One kid, maybe 10 years old, was playing with intensity that reminded Sergio of himself. Aggressive, uncompromising, playing every moment like it mattered. Sergio stopped to watch. The kid looked up, recognized him. You're Sergio Ramos. Finally, someone who knew. Yeah. My grandfather talks about you. Says you were one of the best defenders ever. Grandfather. The kid's grandfather remembered him. Not his father. His grandfather. That's how time works. You move from current to previous to historical. He's right, Sergio said, smiling. Are you still playing? No, not anymore. Why not? Why not? How do you explain to a 10-year-old that bodies break? That time wins every battle? That everyone's career has an expiration date? Because everything ends eventually. Even football. The kid nodded like he understood, but couldn't. He was too young to understand endings. His story was just beginning. Sergio walked away, left the kid to his dreams and broken streets, the same streets that had launched him toward greatness decades ago. Full circle. From Camas to the world and back to Camas. A hero's journey that ends where it began. The truth about legends late at night. Sergio sat on his balcony overlooking Madrid. The city lights stretched endlessly. Millions of people living their lives, most of them not thinking about him at all. He thought about his career, the goals, the trophies, the moments that would be replayed forever. He'd achieved things most players couldn't imagine. won battles most people wouldn't dare fight. But here's what nobody tells you about being a legend. Legends are past tense by definition. You're celebrated for what you did, not what you're doing. You're remembered for moments that are frozen in time while life continues moving forward. You become a reference point, a comparison, a standard, but never again the actual thing. He was 38 years old, still young in regular person years, but in football years he was ancient, done, finished. Real Madrid had moved on. They'd won La Liga the season after he left, reached Champions League finals, proved they didn't need him. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like rejection, like proof that all those years of sacrifice, all that blood and sweat and pain were replaceable. Because that's the brutal truth about professional sports. Everyone is replaceable. Even legends, especially legends. January 2025, the ceremony he didn't want, Real Madrid announced they would retire his number. Number 4, the number he'd worn for 16 years. The number that had become synonymous with defense, leadership, and controlled chaos. It was an honor, the kind of recognition most players never receive. His number would hang in the Bernabeu forever, a permanent reminder that Sergio Ramos had existed, had mattered, but the ceremony felt like a funeral for someone still alive. He stood on the Bernabeu pitch, in a suit this time, not a kit. Florentino Perez gave a speech about his contributions. Clips of his greatest moments played on the big screen. The crowd chanted his name. Sergio Ramos! Sergio Ramos! It was beautiful. It was genuine. It was also goodbye in the most permanent way possible. When it ended, when the applause faded, he walked off the pitch for what would probably be the last time. Not as a player, not as a captain, as a memory being preserved. This is what legends become. Ceremonies and retired numbers and moments frozen in time. The family. He barely knew. His children were growing up. Sergio Jr., Marco, Alejandro, and Maximo. 4 boys, each one developing their own personality, their own dreams, their own lives. For 20 years, Sergio had been present but absent. Physically there, but mentally always in the next match, the next training, the next battle. Now he had time. All the time in the world. And he was trying to be the father he'd never quite been, attending their matches, helping with homework, being present in ways he'd never allowed himself to be. But there was distance, not hostility. Just the gap that forms when you're absent during crucial years. His sons loved him, respected him, but they'd learned to exist without needing him every day. Pilar, his wife, had carried the family for 2 decades while he carried the white armband. She'd raised the kids, managed the household, built a life around his absence. Now he was trying to integrate into a system that had learned to function without him, trying to be essential in a space where he'd made himself optional. "It's okay," Pilar told him one night when she saw him struggling. "We'll figure it out. We have time now. Time." That word again, the thing he'd never had enough of as a player. The thing he now had too much of. March 2025, the realization a random Tuesday. No matches to prepare for, no training to attend. Just another day in a life that had no structure. Sergio sat in his home office, opened his laptop, searched his own name. The results were all historical. Sergio Ramos' greatest moments. Sergio Ramos, 92-48 goal. Sergio Ramos' career highlights, past tense, all of it. Current football news mentioned him rarely, and when it did, it was as a reference point. This young defender is being called the next Sergio Ramos. Real Madrid hasn't had a leader like Sergio Ramos since he left. Comparisons, nostalgia, history. He closed the laptop, stared at the wall, and finally accepted what he'd been avoiding for a year. He was done. Not just done playing, done being the person he'd been. The warrior, the captain, the legend in active voice. Now he was legend in past tense, a story people told, a standard people referenced, a memory people celebrated. But memories don't play football. Memories don't captain teams. Memories don't matter in the present. They just exist. Frozen. Perfect. Unchanging. Dead. The conversation with his father, Jose Maria, was 78 years old. Retired from the factory. Living quietly in Camas. Still watching football every weekend. Sergio visited him one Sunday. Sat in the same small house he'd grown up in. The house that had seemed so big when he was young but now felt tiny compared to his Madrid mansion. "You did good, son," Jose Maria said. "Better than anyone from Camas ever did. It doesn't feel like enough. Never does. That's how you know you cared." They watched a Real Madrid match together, father and son. The team Sergio had captained now playing without him. The white shirt he'd worn now on someone else's back. "Do you miss it?" Jose Maria asked. "Every second of every day. That's football. It takes everything from you. Then it takes itself away." They sat in silence. 2 men who understood that dreams have expiration dates. That glory is temporary. That legends fade, but life continues. April 2025. The final acceptance, Sergio Ramos was 38 years old. Too young to be finished. Too old to continue. He'd scored 101 goals as a defender, won 4 Champions League titles, captained Real Madrid through the greatest era in modern history, set records that would stand for decades, built a legacy that future defenders would study. He'd also collected more red cards than anyone in history. Been called dirty, aggressive, dangerous. Been loved and hated in equal measure. Lived every match like it was his last battle. And now he was just another retired player trying to figure out who he was when he couldn't be who he'd been. The truth he'd finally accepted. Football doesn't need you. It moves on. New players emerge. New captains lead. New legends are born. The game continues with or without you. You can be essential for years, decades even. But eventually, inevitably, you become optional. Then you become historical. Then you become forgotten, not completely. Sergio Ramos would be remembered. Highlight reels would preserve his greatest moments. Record books would list his achievements. Future defenders would study his positioning and timing, but remembered isn't the same as relevant. History isn't the same as present. Legend isn't the same as alive. Epilogue. The legend, who walks alone, May 2025, late afternoon. Sergio stood on his balcony overlooking Madrid. The city moved below him. Millions of people living their lives. Kids playing football in parks, dreaming of being the next big star. Teenagers wearing jerseys with names that weren't his. Adults streaming matches that he wasn't playing in. Life continuing, the world turning. Football evolving. Without him, he'd given the sport everything. His youth, his body, his identity. For 22 years, he'd been Sergio Ramos, the footballer, the captain, the warrior, the legend. Now he was just Sergio, father, husband, retired athlete, man trying to figure out what comes after glory. The Bernabeu was visible in the distance, the stadium where he'd become immortal, where he'd scored impossible goals and lifted historic trophies, where 80,000 people had chanted his name. It was still there, still hosting matches, still creating new memories, just without him. He thought about that 10-year-old kid in Camas, playing on broken streets with dreams too big for a small town. That kid who'd refused to accept limitations, who'd fought his way from poverty to glory through sheer will and relentless determination. That kid had achieved everything he'd dreamed of, and more. But nobody tells you what happens after the dreams come true, after the glory fades, after the crowd stop cheering. Nobody tells you that legends are just people who used to be extraordinary, that captains are just leaders without teams, that warriors are just fighters without wars. Sergio Ramos had been all three. Now he was none of them, just a man on a balcony, watching the sun set on a career that felt both eternal and impossibly brief, holding memories that felt increasingly distant, living with the knowledge that his best moments were behind him and nothing ahead would ever match them. This is what happens to legends. They're celebrated, they're remembered, they're frozen in time at their peak, but they still have to live the rest of their lives, still have to wake up every morning and figure out who they are when they can't be who they were. Sergio Ramos would be fine. He had money, family, recognition, a legacy that would outlive him, but fine isn't glory. Comfortable isn't essential. Remembered isn't relevant. The sun set over Madrid. Another day ending. Another day further from the 93rd minute. Another day deeper into a life he hadn't prepared for. The captain had fallen. Not dramatically, not in battle, just slowly, quietly. The way legends always fall, not with an explosion, but with a whisper that nobody hears. And somewhere in the city below, a 10-year-old kid was playing football on a broken street, dreaming of becoming a legend, not knowing that legends eventually become ghosts, not knowing that glory has an expiration date, not knowing that everyone, even captains, eventually walks alone.